Millionaire woman missed her flight. A poor dad gave her a ride and got more than thanks. The small regional airport in Cedar Falls, Iowa, was nearly deserted as 36-year-old Rebecca Sterling paced frantically near the departure gate, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor. With her auburn hair perfectly styled despite the stress, striking green eyes, and wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than most people made in a month, Rebecca looked every inch the successful businesswoman she was. But right now, she felt powerless. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but that was the last flight to Chicago tonight," the gate agent explained apologetically. "The next flight isn't until 10 a.m. tomorrow." Rebecca closed her eyes, trying to control her frustration. She was the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, a luxury hotel chain worth over $2 billion, and she had the most important board meeting of her career, scheduled for 8 a.m. in Chicago. Missing it could cost her everything she'd worked for over the past 15 years. "What about rental cars?" she asked desperately. "All booked up, I'm afraid. There's a big conference in Des Moines this weekend. Your best bet is the hotel shuttle, but it only goes to the Cedar Falls Marriott." Rebecca pulled out her phone to call her assistant, but there was no signal. The storm that had delayed her flight had also knocked out the cell towers. She was truly stranded in a town she'd never heard of, 300 miles from where she needed to be. As she stood there contemplating her options, she heard a gentle voice behind her. "Excuse me, miss? I couldn't help but overhear. Are you trying to get to Chicago?" Rebecca turned to see a man in his early 30s with sandy brown hair, kind blue eyes, and the sort of honest face that spoke of someone who'd never told a lie that mattered. He was wearing well-worn jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days, but he carried himself with quiet dignity. In his arms was a sleeping little girl, maybe 5 years old, with blonde curls and her father's peaceful expression. "Yes, I am," Rebecca replied, noting the contrast between his modest appearance and his genuine concern for a complete stranger. "I'm driving to Chicago tonight to drop off my daughter with her aunt. You're welcome to ride along if you don't mind the company." He smiled, and Rebecca was struck by the warmth in his expression. "I'm David Thompson, and this little angel is my daughter Sophie." Rebecca hesitated. Everything about her upbringing and business instincts told her not to get in a car with a stranger. But looking at this man holding his sleeping child, something in his demeanor convinced her that he was exactly what he appeared to be, a genuinely good person offering help. "I'm Rebecca Sterling. And honestly, I'm desperate enough to accept your very kind offer." "Great. My truck's in the parking lot. Fair warning though, it's not exactly luxury transportation." David's vehicle turned out to be a 15-year-old Ford pickup truck with a dented tailgate and paint that had faded from red to a rusty pink. But the interior was clean, and Rebecca could see a child's car seat securely fastened in the back. "Sophie's already asleep for the night," David explained as he gently secured his daughter in her car seat. "She's used to long drives. I work construction all over the state, so we spend a lot of time on the road together." As they pulled out of the airport parking lot, Rebecca found herself studying her unlikely rescuer. There was something about David that intrigued her, a quiet strength mixed with gentleness, the kind of man who clearly put his daughter's needs above everything else. "So what takes you to Chicago in such a hurry?" David asked as they merged onto the highway. "Business meeting," Rebecca replied vaguely. She'd learned long ago to be careful about revealing too much about her wealth to strangers. "Must be important to have you flying into Cedar Falls. We don't get many business travelers through here." "You could say that. What about you? You mentioned dropping Sophie off with her aunt?" David's expression grew slightly sad. "My sister lives in Chicago. Sophie spends a few days with her every month while I work on a big project. It's not ideal, but double quotes," he shrugged. "Single parenting isn't always easy." "I imagine not. Where's Sophie's mother, if you don't mind me asking?" She passed away when Sophie was 2. Car accident. David's voice was matter of fact, but Rebecca could hear the pain underneath. It's been just Sophie and me ever since. Rebecca felt a pang of sympathy. I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was. But Sophie's amazing. She's taught me more about life than I ever taught her. David glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping daughter with obvious adoration. She's the reason I get up every morning. As they drove through the Iowa countryside, Rebecca found herself drawn into conversation with David in a way that surprised her. In her world, every interaction was carefully calculated, every relationship serving some business purpose. But talking to David felt refreshingly genuine. What kind of construction work do you do? She asked. Mostly residential renovations, some commercial work. I specialize in restoring old buildings. There's something satisfying about bringing something beautiful back to life. David's voice carried real passion. I started my own company about 3 years ago. It's small, just me and a couple of guys, but we do good work. That sounds rewarding. It is when I can get enough projects to keep us busy. Times have been tough lately. A lot of people are putting off renovations, and the big construction companies usually get the contracts I bid on. Rebecca noticed the resignation in his voice and realized that despite his positive attitude, David was struggling financially. The old truck, his worn clothes, the fact that he was driving through the night to save on a hotel room, it all painted a picture of someone working hard but barely getting by. What about you? David asked. What kind of business are you in? Hospitality, Rebecca replied carefully. I work for a hotel company. Ah, that explains the late night travel. Hotel business never sleeps, right? Something like that. As the miles passed, Rebecca found herself more relaxed than she'd been in months. David was easy to talk to, and his stories about Sophie's latest adventures at kindergarten made her laugh despite her stress about the morning meeting. There was something about his perspective on life, focusing on simple pleasures and genuine relationships rather than profit margins and market share, that reminded her of things she'd forgotten about herself. Around midnight, they stopped at a 24-hour diner for coffee and gas. Sophie woke up and charmed the waitress by ordering chocolate chip pancakes for dessert breakfast. Rebecca watched David patiently cut up his daughter's pancakes, wipe syrup from her chin, and listen attentively to her sleepy chatter about a book they'd been reading together. Daddy, who's the pretty lady? Sophie asked, finally noticing Rebecca properly. This is Miss Rebecca. She needed a ride to Chicago, so we're helping her out. That's nice, Sophie said with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child. Daddy always helps people. He helped Mrs. Peterson fix her fence last week, and he didn't even charge her money. David looked slightly embarrassed. Mrs. Peterson is 87 and lives on a fixed income. It was just a couple of boards. Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. Here was a man who was clearly struggling financially himself, yet he regularly helped others without expecting payment. When was the last time she'd met someone who operated from such genuine kindness? What do you want to be when you grow up, Sophie? Rebecca asked the little girl. A veterinarian. I want to help sick animals feel better. Daddy says helping others is the most important job anyone can have. Rebecca glanced at David, who was focused on his coffee but couldn't hide a small proud smile. As they got back on the road, Sophie fell asleep again, and Rebecca found herself sharing more about her life than she'd intended. Not the business details, but the personal struggles, the loneliness at the top, the pressure of being responsible for thousands of employees, the way success had somehow left her feeling empty. Sounds like you need to remember what you're working for, David said quietly. I mean, money's important. Believe me, I know. But if that's all there is, what's the point? His words hit Rebecca harder than she expected. When had she stopped thinking about purpose and started focusing only on profit? When had building her empire become more important than building a life? As the Chicago skyline came into view at dawn, Rebecca realized that this unexpected journey had given her more than just transportation. It had given her perspective and reminded her of the person she used to be before business consumed everything. But what she didn't yet know was that David Thompson was about to receive something far more valuable than her gratitude. As David's truck pulled up to the luxury hotel district in downtown Chicago, Rebecca felt a strange reluctance to say goodbye. The 6-hour journey had been one of the most genuine conversations she'd had in years, and David's quiet wisdom had given her clarity about her upcoming board meeting that all her expensive consultants had failed to provide. "This is perfect," Rebecca said as they stopped in front of the Palmer House Hilton. "Thank you so much, David. You literally saved my career." "Just glad I could help," David replied, getting out to retrieve Rebecca's luggage from the truck bed. "Good luck with your meeting." Sophie, now awake and energetic, bounced in her car seat. "Bye, Miss Rebecca. I hope your work thing goes good." Rebecca felt an unexpected tightness in her throat. "Thank you, sweetheart. Take care of your daddy." As she watched David's truck disappear into Chicago traffic, Rebecca made a mental note to send him some kind of thank you gift. But first, she had the fight of her professional life ahead of her. 3 hours later, Rebecca sat at the head of the polished conference table in Sterling Enterprises' Chicago headquarters, facing the board of directors who had been questioning her leadership for months. The hostile takeover attempt by a competitor had put her position as CEO in jeopardy, and today's meeting would determine whether she kept control of the company she'd built from the ground up. "Rebecca," said Chairman William Matthews, a silver-haired man who'd been her father's business partner decades ago, "the board has serious concerns about your recent performance. Revenue is down, and Henderson Group's offer is very attractive to our shareholders." Rebecca took a deep breath, thinking about David's words from the night before, about remembering what you're working for. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, "you're right that our revenue is down. But I want to talk about something more important than quarterly profits. I want to talk about what Sterling Enterprises really stands for." For the next hour, Rebecca presented a vision for the company that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. Instead of just defending past decisions, she outlined a plan to transform Sterling Enterprises into a model of corporate responsibility. Hotels that provided living wages for employees, community investment programs, and sustainable business practices that would create long-term value rather than short-term gains. "This isn't just about profit margins," she concluded. "It's about building something that matters, something that makes people's lives better." The board voted unanimously to reject the takeover bid and support Rebecca's new vision. As the meeting ended, she realized that David Thompson's influence had just saved her company. That afternoon, Rebecca sat in her office researching David's construction business. What she found both impressed and concerned her. David Thompson. Construction had an impeccable reputation for quality work and fair dealing, but the company was clearly struggling. They'd lost several recent bids to larger firms, and Rebecca could see from public records that David was behind on his business loan payments. She made a decision that would change both their lives. The next evening, David was in his small workshop behind his house, refinishing an antique cabinet for a client, when Sophie came running in with excitement. "Daddy, there's a really fancy car outside, and a lady in a pretty dress wants to talk to you." David wiped his hands on a rag and walked outside to find a sleek black sedan parked in front of his modest ranch house. Standing beside it was Rebecca, but she looked different than she had during their late-night drive. Her business attire and confident posture made it clear that she was someone important. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" "I came to properly thank you," she said with a smile, "and to be completely honest with you about who I am." Over the next few minutes, Rebecca explained that she was the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, worth over $2 billion, and that David's kindness and wisdom had quite literally saved her company. David listened in stunned silence. You're telling me you're a billionaire and I picked you up at a small-town airport? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And I'm also telling you that the conversation we had last night reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Rebecca pulled out a folder from her car. David, I want to offer you something. Sterling Enterprises is launching a new division focused on historical restoration and sustainable construction. We need someone to head it up, someone with integrity, skill, and a genuine commitment to quality work. David opened the folder and found a detailed job offer. The salary was more money than he'd ever imagined making, $200,000 a year to start, plus equity in the company and full benefits. Rebecca, this is incredible, but I'm just a small-town contractor. I don't have experience running a corporate division. You have something more valuable than experience, character. You drove a stranger 300 miles out of pure kindness. You help elderly neighbors for free. You're raising an amazing daughter while building a business based on integrity. Those aren't skills you learn in business school. Sophie, who had been listening from the porch, came running over. Daddy, does this mean we're rich now? Rebecca knelt down to Sophie's level. It means your daddy is going to help build beautiful things for lots of people. And it means you can go to any school you want and have all the opportunities in the world. David felt overwhelmed. Why are you doing this? Because yesterday, when you saw someone stranded and struggling, your first instinct was to help. Because you turned a stressful journey into one of the most meaningful conversations I've had in years. Because you reminded me that success isn't just about what you accumulate, it's about what you contribute. 6 months later, David stood in the construction trailer overlooking Sterling Enterprises' newest project, a $50 million restoration of Chicago's historic auditorium building. Under his leadership, the Heritage Division had already secured contracts for similar projects in New York, Boston, and San Francisco. Sophie was thriving in her new private school, taking violin lessons and excelling in her advanced reading program. But more importantly, she was still the same sweet, grounded child she'd always been, thanks to David's unwavering commitment to keeping their lives centered on what truly mattered. David, Rebecca said, joining him in the trailer, the board is incredibly impressed with your work. The auditorium project is ahead of schedule and under budget. Good team makes all the difference, David replied, but Rebecca could see the quiet pride in his accomplishment. There's something else. The board wants to offer you a partnership track. If you keep performing like this, you could own a significant stake in the company within 5 years. David shook his head in amazement. You know, a year ago I was worried about making my truck payment. Now I'm potentially becoming a part owner of a billion-dollar company. You were always worth this much, David. You just needed someone to recognize it. That evening, as David tucked Sophie into bed in their new house, a beautiful restored Victorian that he'd renovated himself as their first project, she looked up at him with those bright blue eyes. Daddy, are you happy? Very happy, sweetheart. Are you? Yes, but Daddy, what is it? I'm glad you gave Miss Rebecca a ride that night. Because now we get to help fix lots of beautiful old buildings, and she's part of our family too. David smiled, thinking about how a simple decision to help a stranded stranger had transformed both their lives. What did I always tell you about? Helping people? That it's always the right thing to do, Sophie recited sleepily. That's right. And sometimes, when we help others without expecting anything back, amazing things happen. As he turned off the lights and headed to his own room, David reflected on the extraordinary turn his life had taken. One act of kindness, offering a ride to a stranded woman, had opened doors he never could have imagined. Rebecca had given him more than a job or financial security. She'd given him the opportunity to use his skills and passion on a scale that could preserve beautiful buildings for future generations. And in return, he had given her something equally valuable, A reminder of what success really looked like when it was built on integrity and genuine care for others. Sometimes, the most important journeys aren't about the destination. Sometimes they're about who you meet along the way, and how a simple act of kindness can create ripples that change everything. In a world that often seemed to reward selfishness, their story stood as proof that generosity, authenticity, and genuine human connection were still the most powerful forces for transformation, both personal and professional. The end.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.